Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Lucario deck from the 2007 format. This list is mine. I've played around with it quite a bit, but it's based very heavily on Gino Lombardi's World's Top 32 list from that year. Now, the basic idea of the deck is that Lucario is just really good. Basically, it had 2007, right before Nationals, the Diamond and Pearl set came out. We saw the Diamond and Pearl set, I will say, showed a decrease in the strength of powers compared to some of the stuff that we had been used to in the past. Things like Pidgeot, the Evolutions, Delta Species Metagross. But the sheer energy for damage ratio and hit points was significantly stronger. Things like Machamp, for example, for a single energy, you could hit for 90 damage. It had 130 hit points for a single prize attacker. This was significantly stronger than some of the earlier sets from that same format. Now, Lucario is basically just a very strong stats Pokemon. It's got 90 HP. The fighting type can be very strong in this format with things like Jolteon being all over the place. 1 energy for a solid 30, and 2 energy for 40 and spread 20. So essentially you're hitting for 60 damage for only 2 fighting energies. And the main idea of the deck is just to simply put a ton of pressure on your opponent and overwhelm them before they're able to set up. You use a lot of things like Curse Stone to get in some additional chip damage, and then things like Cessation Crystal to really shut off any sort of aggression that a stronger power-based deck would have. Now, as far as the matchups for the deck go, it's going to be very strong against basically any sort of deck that relies very heavily on Pokemon powers. Different Evolutions variants from this time period, for example, it's going to be very strong against. It's going to be very strong against a lot of like partner-based decks, where decks would try to play things that would basically partner two things together. Things like you would see like Lucario with like Evolutions is an incredibly good deck in the 2007 format, incredibly strong. But things a much more direct Lucario approach usually is slightly stronger in that matchup. It's going to be weaker against slower setup stage 2 decks that if they do set up, they will have a stronger late game than you. Examples of that are going to be things like Empoleon. Empoleon is much weaker than you in the early game, but if they are able to set up and consistently be able to find their Empoleons, find their Scramble energies, they're going to be much stronger in the late game than you are. It also is just going to take, in most situations, take an auto loss to Banette. There's really not a whole lot you can do in that matchup. Sometimes you might get lucky if they don't open super well and you get like a Gligar with a Toxic Grip off. But that matchup is going to be pretty close to impossible. So let's just go ahead here, jump into the cards, and start talking about individual cards here. So if you play just 4 Railu, 4 Lucario, essentially that's going to create problems where even though you're playing a very fast aggressive deck, you're going to mulligan so many times that your opponent is going to have all those extra cards and all those extra options, and it's going to make the game much harder for you. So we play 4 copies of Gligar. Gligar is incredibly strong in its own right. If it doesn't have any energy attached to it, it has Free Retreat. So not only if you open Gligar, that gives you an option to get that turn 1 Railu out, but the attack for single fighting energy and Toxic Grip does 10 damage and the defending Pokemon is poisoned. This is also really good in the mid and late game against other decks in the format, where essentially if you're not able to really put any pressure on them with Lucario, you can just come up and Toxic Grip for a turn, and essentially if they don't retreat or evolve that Pokemon, by the time it gets back into their turn, they're going to have taken 40 damage, 10 from the Gligar, and then 10 for poison at the end of your turn, 10 for poison at the end of their turn, and then 10 again for poison at the end of your following turn. So it can put a lot of pressure on the opponent for very little investment. Play 4 copies of Railu. Railu is just so incredibly strong in this. I always like to tell the story about the guy at the Last Chance qualifier that went 8-0, winning 5 of his games first turn with Railu before his opponent even got to draw. This was largely due to how popular Holen's cast form was at the time. I will say in modern 2007, it's not the staple that it was. I would say in actual 2007, probably 95% of decks would play Holen's cast form, with the exception being Infernape. But I would say in a more modern 2007, it's probably closer to 50-50 if the decks play cast form or not. Going along with this, Gligar is the same thing. Gligar with a plus power or strength charm will one-hit KO a Holen's cast form. Railu can one-hit KO a Holen's cast form on a coin flip. Same thing with Eevee as well. Eevee is also very common in this format. And then we already talked a little bit about Lucario. Just basically a very straightforward stats Pokemon. 90 HP on a stage 1, 1 for 30, and then 2 fighting for 40 and spread for 20. So essentially you're doing 60 to get damage, ideally on the second turn of the game. To support Lucario, since we play such a thin Pokemon line, we're only playing 12 here, we get to play a very bolstered item lineup, or trainer lineup here. And essentially I split that into one, consistency, to make sure that we are basically throwing this Lucario in our opponent's face as quickly as possible and as consistently as possible. And then different tech options to help us put on some additional pressure. So for Castaway, not only is this going to grab us our energy, the Cessation Crystal or Strength Charm, and then a supporter for the following turn, it also helps thin our deck by 3 cards, which can be very strong as well. For Celios, key to getting that turn 2 Lucario, or if we open with Gligar, it helps us get the Railu out as well. 3 copies of Steven's Advice. You can play Mary's Request in this. I see a lot of people, if they're just playing a stage 1 deck, they always play Mary's Request. I'll say that I found in most situations, Steven's Advice will net you the same minimum of the same 3 cards, and in most cases will net you more. Generally, a deck like this can play their hand down well enough that you're not going to be stuck with a ton of dead cards, so you're not really bothered by that 7-card limit there. So generally, I prefer Steven's Advice in most of my decks, but I will say Mary's Request has some possibilities. 1 copy of Copycat. There's not really any hand disruption in this format, so a lot of decks will build up large hands. It's very easy to Copycat for 6, 7, 8 cards. So Copycat makes a very strong supporter. We do play the Holen's line in here. 4 Transceiver, 2 Mentor. Really not trying to do a whole lot of setup, so I don't think it's as absolutely imperative to find that turn 1 Mentor for a deck like this as you would have with something like Argon, for example, where you'd really like to have that 3rd Mentor in here. And in the later stages of the game, you're really just looking to get 1 good Mentor off. You're not really looking to get multiple Mentors off for, like other decks are. Once again, Argon, for example. 1 Holen Adventure. Pretty easy. Discard a card, draw 3. We don't play any of the Delta species, so we're not going to be able to get that 4th draw off. Holen Scientist. Great to match hand sizes with our opponent. 1 Scat. Man, I just cannot keep from rearranging everything. 1 Scat. Essentially, this is just mainly in there to search out those Curse Stone. In the matchups where you need Curse Stone, you really need Curse Stone. So you just want to be able to just basically grab 2 or 3 Curse Stone with the Scat and then just constantly throw them at your opponent, forcing them to try to find answers to it. You combine that Curse Stone damage with things like that 20 spread from Aurora Spear, and you're going to put your opponent in a really tough spot really quickly. Next up, we have the damage modifiers here. We play 4 copies of Plus Power, just finding that additional 10 damage, 1 copy of Strength Charm. So essentially, we play a total of 5 different damage modifiers in the deck. This comes in huge, far more than you think it would. There's so many situations where you'll be 10 shy or even 20 shy of knocking something out, and you can find those Plus Powers or Strength Charms to just get that key knockout. Aurora Spear does so much to help set those up as well. 4 Cessation Crystals. I will say these are absolutely worth their weight in gold against any deck in the format that plays, that relies on powers. It can be kind of annoying if you're playing against decks in the format that don't rely on powers, things like Empoleon, for example, but you absolutely have to play 4 of these in the deck. Things like Rhyperior are unwinnable if you don't play 4 Cessation Crystal. 1 copy of Strength Charm, just to access that extra plus power. A couple of things to note on this is you can Plus Power and Strength Charm the same Pokemon. The advantage to Strength Charm is that it doesn't get discarded at the end of your turn. So, say for example, we wanted to play a Copycat. We might need a Strength Charm, but maybe not. we can throw it on a Pokemon, and if that Pokemon doesn't attack, then we get to keep the Strength Charm, where plus 5 would be discarded at the end of the turn. The downside is we cannot put Strength Charm and Cessation Crystal on the same Pokemon because they're both tools. So this is why we go with 1 copy of Strength Charm and 4 copies of Plus Power. Generally, in a deck like this, Plus Power is going to be better, but being able to search it out with Castaway and then playing a 5th copy warrants playing the 1 copy of Strength Charm. 4 Curse Stone, gotta find that chip damage. This is so strong with so many big power decks in the format. Things like all the evolutions, or if you're playing against something like Infernite, Delcatty, eventually you're going to get some cheap prizes off on those Delcatties, and that's going to be very important for you when making those prize trades. 14 Fire Energy. We want to be able to make sure that we're hitting that turn 1 energy drop, and then that we're consistently finding those energies over the course of the game. I've talked about this in other videos, but essentially when you're playing any sort of speed stage 1 deck or fast aggressive deck, it's very, very important that you're playing an energy. You're getting your energy drop in every single turn, especially in the first 5 turns of the game. It's really going to determine how successful your deck is going to be. If you start falling behind on energy drops too early in the game is going to become almost unwinnable for you. So I like to go with a solid number where I'm gonna pretty consistently open with it, and then be able to see one every turn of the game as well. Anyways, that's going to go ahead and wrap up the deck profile video for Lucario. I enjoy playing the game, or enjoy playing the deck. I will say it doesn't have a whole lot of depth to it. It's a deck that I think can be a very good tournament call in the right meta, but at the same time too, it's not a deck that is really going to challenge you as a player, or really make you try to find some off-the-wall moves with. I will say, if you're somebody that's new to the 2007 format and you're looking for a deck to kind of ease your way into it as well, this is a great deck to pick up. But for more competitive players, absolutely don't underestimate this deck. It does really, really well against, I would say, most of the top decks in the format. And it's definitely a deck that's very, very scary to play against. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. And of course, I hope to see you in the next video.